Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've seen our second sports biopic of the day, Ferrari.
Yes.
Directed by Michael Mann, based on the life of Enzo Ferrari, or in particular a year in 1957 that was important in the history of Ferrari, the company, and Ferrari, the man. It's also based on 1991 biography called Enzo Ferrari, The Man, the Cars, the Races, the Machine, by Brock Yates, who's a motorsports journalist. I didn't know what to expect going into this, really. I like motor racing. I am interested in the history of the company, that sort of thing. I'm not particularly into Ferrari or anything, though. And I was just captivated by this.
Were you?
What a film this is.
Oh, okay. Well, you have to tell me why, because...
This wasn't for you?
No, I did like it. But I think I had higher expectations. I'm not sure what the film is about, really. Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, it's about winning this race and saving the company, and it's about recognizing or not recognizing his new son. It's about his marriage. But, if it's about this person, I feel I don't have a very good sense of his character, really.
I guess it's like the passions that drive the man and what he's... there's that line in the trailer which obviously shows up here, but in the film it's passed by. You don't notice it. Whereas in the trailer, it's an important line where he's talking to his drivers after they've failed in his eyes because they didn't pass, they didn't brake late when they needed to, and he's talking about going into the corner, and he says two objects cannot occupy the same place at the same moment in time. Mm-hmm. And in the trailer, that's important. That's like telling you what this film's about. And it's about the second family that he has. The positions that, from the trailer, because it's not clear from the trailer that he has this mistress and a second family. So from the trailer, it looked like it was about him and his wife. He's played by Adam Driver. His wife's played by Penélope Cruz. Because clearly they're clashing in the trailer. I mean, you have the shot in the trailer of when she fires a gun near his head. And so you're like, right, it's about the clash between those two. Those are the two who can't be in the same place at the same time. But actually, and I mean, there's an element of that because you have the power struggle over the shares, the power of attorney. There's the if you can hear that, that's someone drilling or something. But once you understand from the film that he has this second family, that from the start in the film, you've got his wife saying, I don't care who you fuck. We've got this agreement. I don't care who else you fuck, but you've got to be here on time, this, that, and the other.
Before the maid arrives.
Yeah, before the maid arrives. That's right. That's the agreement. But there's a big difference between I don't care who you fuck and you have a second wife, essentially. Not quite a wife, but someone who he had a child with and fell in love with 12 years prior during the war and has continued an affair with. And it's those two. It's his real wife, his actual wife, who he's in business with, and his mistress.
I don't think it's about the wife, because you get a sense that really she doesn't care. It's about the son. The son is the problem because she's mourning the loss of their son, and the whole film kind of verges on that condition that he not be recognized. Yeah, until she dies, basically.
Yeah.
So I think the women are not the problem. I think the problem is in what she sees as the replacement of her son.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But still, I kind of, I feel ambivalent about the film, and maybe I have to work it out because I'm not at all interested in cars or racing. Right, so maybe a lot of the pleasures that are open to you are just not to me. Like I wasn't at all thrilled by the races, or by the countryside, or anything.
You have been before though in different films, so it's like I remember in Ford v Ferrari or Le Mans '66, which together you like the racing, and Rush. You really like the racing in that. So it's not like that is alien to you, but just here it wasn't working.
But it's so. I suppose what I'm saying is that it's something I'm not inherently interested in. So you rely on the film to kind of make it interesting for you. And this one, to me, didn't particularly. Like, I mean, it wasn't dull to watch, and I didn't, I wasn't bored by it. But I sometimes couldn't distinguish the cars.
Well,
Right,
it is.
because
It
they
is
were
an
all
issue.
red.
It is an issue that you've got this setup where Ferrari and Maserati are both racing in the Mille Miglia, which is this 1,000-mile race
Mm.
in Italy. And for historical accuracy, I assume the cars are both red. Ferrari is historically very famously red, and,
Yes.
but red, I think, is the every nation also has its racing colours. The British racing green, for instance, and I think the Germans are white, and Italy has always had red.
Right.
So all these cars are red, and it is a bit of a struggle in some of those shots to understand which car is which.
Yeah.
And the film isn't doing a lot to help you with that, I suppose.
And I think some of the ways that the scenes are dramatized. So, for example, in that scene where the wheel of the car hits something on the road and the racing driver goes, flying through the sky, and then you have a lot of people who die as a result of that. It's the climax of the film, really. But in that scene, like, the dramatization of it to me is so cliched. You have a family indoors.
Yes.
You see the little children, then one of the little kids goes running out. The father goes past and gets him. So they're aware of the danger, and then of course the way the car crashes is such that it kills a lot of people, including children. So I thought that was.
I thought there was not a necessity to make that work, and it was a little cheap. Although it is true in that crash, a number of children did die, and it's kind of putting the. I mean, it's interesting. You do often get in racing films a crash that is very impactful and claims the life of drivers and things. I mean, in Rush, it was all about. But one of the things was the crash that burned Niki Lauda, and Niki Lauda's thing of, I will only risk my life to a certain percentage. Above that, there's too much risk. And the other drivers are going, you've got to race. We race. It's dangerous. It's what we love, and that sort of thing. But very, very rarely, I think, do you see a crash that takes a spectator's life. And that's really different here. And particularly because up until then, the film, in terms of graphic quality, has been kind of so tame. It's not had anything to show, really. It's had a bit of a sex scene, that's it. And then all of a sudden you've got bodies strewn across the street, and you've got the driver's body in half, and it's all of a sudden extremely impactful imagery. I thought that was interesting. And it did work. There was a girl sitting behind us, and did you hear her like really buying into that?
Sure.
When the camera's focused in on the cat's eye that he's just about to hit. We've seen him just miss one, and it's like there's a reason there was a close up on that cat's eye. And the next one comes, and the shot slows down, and she gasped.
Yes.
And it's like, wow, that really worked for someone.
Sure, it just didn't work for me, and I don't know. So I've read quite a bit, and I've seen films on Gino Agnelli, right? Who appears in the film because Ferrari does this bit of a con so that Agnelli could buy into the company, right? And
He's
plans.
trying to get Agnelli interested.
That's
because
right.
Ferrari's in financial difficulties.
And Agnelli is like this incredibly glamorous figure, this beautiful man who was the heir, to the Fiat fortune, and a kind of a padrone, and married to this incredibly glamorous woman who had affairs with everyone. And I expected a little bit of that with Ferrari, because he was also that kind of figure on a much smaller scale. But kind of someone who got a sense of self from his sleeping around, basically. This film paints him quite differently. It's all about two different sets of families. But you don't get a sense of what drives him. And actually, part of the criticisms of the film where, they were saying, oh, well, it should have been made with Italians, or, I mean, I don't, it's an American film. I don't, necessarily support that. But I do think that more of an Italian perspective would have brought out different dimensions in the film. Kind of, questions of class, for example, that are just kind of not there, really. So, and I think for me, maybe part of the problem of the film is Adam Driver, because on the one hand, I think he's got great authority There's something about the way that he walks and his height, yeah, and his build, yeah, that kind of, it conveys the sense of power and authority,
Mm.
right? On the other hand, you really don't get much of a sense of what his interior life is like. Yeah.
I don't know, but I mean, I felt like I did. I
Ah,
felt
right.
like I
Okay.
just felt like I got the character. I really liked how dry his sense of humor is. The fact that he has one, for one thing,
Uh-huh.
and that he will make jokes essentially to himself. And it's not that he's just making a joke, but he's it's the way he will like tell someone to fuck off, but he'll do it in a way that he's enjoying. Do you know what I mean? Like when he's giving the drivers their pep talks before they take off on the Mille Miglia, because it's a race against the clock rather than exactly against other races. So everyone goes off a minute apart, so he's able to chat to everyone just before they go. And the one driver's asking about a couple of other drivers should he look out for, and he says, "Look out for children and cats. They're your real enemy. Like they're the real danger." It's like that's a funny line, and it's dismissive of these other guys.
I know, but
I really like that stuff. And
okay, but to me, that's the difference between the role that's written, yes, and what he conveys. And for me, the proof, so to speak, was in his scenes with Penelope Cruz, where you get a sense that you're completely understanding everything that's going on in her head, basically. Whereas he seems very blank. Yeah. So if he's given a line, he's given a line. But actually, what the actor is conveying of the character through himself, through his body, and his face and his gestures, that I thought was quite limited what I was getting from Adam Driver.
I do know what you mean about those scenes. I think there's definitely a feeling in those scenes that the weight is on the other foot. He does not have the power in those scenes because he's been caught.
Yes.
He's been found out, and he's having to respond. He can't be proactive. Whereas in other scenes where he's combative with people, wherever, he always, as you say, has this authority. He has this power. He is what do they call him, the commandatore. All the time. I do know what you mean. But I saw his kind of I suppose I would call it more stillness than blankness, although I do get it. I saw it as a kind of like an unwillingness to respond, or like a kind of he's taking in the situation where for once he is not the one in charge of things.
I don't know.
I know what you mean though.
I think maybe I'm just too familiar with Italian culture. But I thought, the film is set in 1957.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically like just, a dozen years after the war. It's the beginnings of the economic miracle. Yeah, kind of. There's a whole kind of way of life that kind of is appearing. Yeah. But it's not quite prosperous. I mean, you get no sense of that from this film, really. And yet you would expect to, right? I mean, there's a lot of references of, there's families that work in the factory that are reliant on you, and there's a scene of Modena and why they can or they can't divorce, and the way that news circulates, and so I think the film is attempting to give you a kind of a depiction of the culture. It's just not a very complex or rich or interesting one.
Sure.
Yeah. So I thought that was a failure as well. But maybe I'm focusing too much on why I find the film less satisfying, which is not to say that it's not good or satisfying. I mean, I think Penelope Cruz is tremendous, right? I do think that the way that the story of the marriage, so it's like, because structurally you have like this double family, this double son, yes, this mother who wishes that the son she has alive were dead, as opposed to her daughter-in-law who wishes, that her son were alive. I mean, there's all kind of these interesting doublings and kind of structural oppositions built into the narrative structure of the film that kind of means that it's always kind of alive, or there's always something unfolding, in that. It's kind of, it's rich in interesting ways. And I do think it looks fantastic, yeah.
It's great we got to see it at the cinema, because I know in the States, at least, this was supposed to go just to streaming, and then it was, they eventually kind of relented or found someone that was going to give it a theatrical release, which it really deserves. And
Yes.
in this country, I don't know whether that was kind of ever in question, but it has been released theatrically anyway by Sky.
Well, I wish we'd have seen it in IMAX
If we'd had the opportunity.
if we'd had the opportunity, because I mean, I think there is something about the blacks. A lot of the scenes of the driving scenes are at night, and a lot of the scenes
It's a
are
long
at
race.
night. So
Well, Michael Mann is famous for the way he shoots at night.
yeah. So I think there was something visually kind of richer that the film could make available if only the projection system at Cineworld was up to it.
Up to it, yeah.
Which it wasn't. I think also we noticed that the sound levels were quite low at the cinema today, and I think also it's a film that would have benefited from just a higher kind of sound.
Yeah,
level.
well, just a lot. I mean, it was quiet during the ads beforehand, and we were commenting on it, and I thought, is this? I should have gone and told someone basically. I should have gone and asked turn the sound up in screen 11 but you were right as well when before the film you said it's kind of going in and out, it's uneven, and I wasn't really thinking that, but in the film it dips when they have that big argument after she's found out about the second family, and they're talking about Dino, their son who passed away, and he yells at one point, and the sound dropped at that point, the volume dipped at that point, and I thought that's the opposite of what this needs, and I really didn't understand it. We should maybe complain.
But anyway, I mean, I feel also that I'm not the best person to comment on Mann, because he's got like really rabid followers, and I've never been a fan. Yeah, like kind of there are films that I've liked better than others, like The Last of the Mohicans and Heat, but there's always something about his films that leaves me a bit cold, that I don't get involved in them. They don't move me. And I think that was true of Collateral and other works of his. And I think this one to me suffers from the same thing. Like I think I would have liked to have seen a Ferrari that was sexier, that was more passionate. At the beginning, when the wife shoots him, right, and says, kind of, you agree to be here before the maid comes in, you get the sense that he's sleeping around all the time, right?
Well, that's what I think was the interesting kind of revelation of that he's not, or at least we're not seeing that. He has just one partner, and that's what right. The wife doesn't know. That's right. Interesting.
That's right. Anyway, the sense of a passionate person, to me, doesn't really come across in the film. Though there are moments, those moments within the Christian where he grabs her ass, but it's only really to move her so that you could see the Ferrari sign. Yeah, I thought kind of, that was quite witty. But it would have been, I think, for me, more interesting also had it been tied to a sex drive, really, where the film becomes a story of like competing families, right? Rather than, a man's passions. Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't know how true it is of him. I mean, I know you're talking about kind of the red-blooded Italianness and the feeling, the lack of feeling of culture that the film conveys. Yes. That you think would be truer. But it may not just be that true of Ferrari. I mean, you get this thing at the end of it. Well, we've already seen, or we learn that he's been with this woman for 12 years, and that their relationship continues beyond the
death
wife's
of his
death.
wife. Yeah.
So and his son does eventually take his name after her death, and is now the vice president of the company. I mean, it may just be true that his passions were familial and not so much just I'll fuck anybody. Even though you think someone with that much power and appeal and all that.
I just read very cursorily his Wikipedia page, in which, him having affairs with multiple women were front page news in the early 1960s, right? And also, I think from a certain kind of perspective, the two things about, having two families and being, behaving honorably towards both, and particularly to the child, does not negate the rest.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe I shouldn't find that a problem in the film. A film can do everything. But I was very glad of the scenes with Penélope Cruz, because it seemed to me that she brought a liveliness and excitement to her scenes that to me were otherwise lacking in the film as a whole, which is a bit surprising considering that, it should be full of spectacular chase scenes and, it's tension and the possibility of death, and and I wasn't really thrilled by any of that.
I was really surprised at how kind of slowly the film begins and gets you into the story. And there's it starts off with that exciting moment where she's incredibly pissed off at him and shoots at him. But then it's quite placid for a little while, and he goes and visits his son's grave, and it's giving you this kind of gentle backstory as to who he is and his relationship with his wife. And I find that really interesting and really surprising, because I think you are expecting, sex and racing and stuff. And I enjoyed the racing. I like that it kind of didn't put a huge amount of stuff. It was interesting that, it talks about the race, the big race, the Mille Miglia, as the race that essentially is to save Ferrari. Pretty much says that, it's between you and Maserati, and you're both in financial difficulties, and this is the race that will put you on the front page and will get you the investment that you need, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't then it doesn't then sell that too hard, which it sounds like it could be a criticism, but I like the way it went. It's because the racing scenes are interspersed with personal storytelling and other things, and I liked how it went, and I thought it was interestingly structured, because the other thing you got to remember is that it's an incredibly long race, 1,000 miles. It takes like 10-11 hours to complete that, so you've got a long time to tell a story in the middle of that. I also thought it was interesting that it reminded me of Ford v Ferrari, in that the race begins as we want to beat the rival team. In Ford v Ferrari, it's Ford v Ferrari, and in here it's Ferrari v Maserati. But that race is over relatively early. In that film, the Ferraris go out, and in this film, the Maseratis go out quite early. But then there's another element of drama that the film, the race finishes off with a different thing. And here it's the accident, and in that film, it's the thing about the team orders to tell them to cross the line at the same time, and that was a whole drama between essentially the racer and the company. I thought that was an interesting bit of structuring, and essentially true. I mean, it's true of both races.
It is, but so another nickel is that, to me, like, when you read about mid, 20th century, things like, bicycle races in the pre-war period primarily, really, but also in the early 50s, and these car races, that became like increasingly popular. They were like a bit of a sociological phenomenon because of what they said about science and transport and motors and speed and modernity, like a modern life, that was only like 30 years or 40 years removed from horses being the major mode of transportation, right? So kind of there's a sense of like the miracle of speed and modern life and everything moving at a different pace, and the film conveys none of that.
No, I'm okay with that.
Well, I'm not. I mean, because I suppose to me, one of the reasons why the film is kind of relatively unsatisfying and seemingly overpraised is that it lacks texture, because a better filmmaker would have brought all those elements as background, as kind of, something that's there, but that's not the drama, right? But that is nonetheless there. Whereas here, the drama is saving the company and saving his marriage, I suppose. That's kind of the two things that would go together, really. Or, saving is the wrong word. Saving his company and the state of his marriage, really.
I wonder whether you're just expecting a little bit too much of the film. It's funny, I listened back to our podcast on Ford v Ferrari a little while ago, and I was shocked because I rewatched the film as well and had a terrific time. And I was shocked at how much I disagreed with everything I was saying, because I was picking up on things that I saw were niggles and details, and you were concentrating on things that were like the reason to watch the movie.
Sure.
It's about the friendship, and it's about the fight and so on. It's like all that big stuff that I was missing the wood from the trees.
And now we're doing the opposite.
I feel like we kind of are. Like maybe in time to come, you will have another look at this, when it's on streaming or whatever, and you'll go, no, this is not what I thought. But I can totally sympathise with the way you're feeling. Sometimes that's how you feel, and maybe you will never feel different.
Yeah, and maybe I do recognise that both the subject matter and the filmmaker are kind of alien to not alien, but are at a distance from my normal, kind of affinities, you know. So because I actually find almost, well, all of Mann's films, except for The Last of the Mohicans, kind of cold, you know. And I do think even the melodrama of it, you know, could have been more successful. Like I wasn't really moved by anything, you know.
No, I wasn't moved by anything.
And yet you should have been, because you know this is a melodrama also about family, yeah, kind of. So you know you should have felt. I should have felt more for Penelope Cruz's loss of her son. I should have felt more for
Shailene Woodley.
Shailene Woodley need and desire to recognize, or to have her son recognized. Yes, so important in the Italy of the day, right? Where kind of to not have a father is like you're a pariah, right? You know, so kind of all of those stakes, which are emotional and social, you know, to me, kind of, they weren't really well handled. If they would have been better handled, you would have felt them, yeah. And I didn't, right? So kind of, I mean, the only thing that comes across really vividly and in a complex manner to me is Penelope Cruz's character. Yeah,
So it's funny.
Her betrayal, her loss, her anger. Yeah.
So much of I think you're right, and she does get into her character and her performance. You know, find some really complex places to go, but also for a lot of the film, I find her. While I loved her performance, I also thought you could say it's quite one note. You know, a lot of the film is essentially her being pretty pissed off with him, and it's, you know, later that the real depths of what her feelings are come out. So like I was watching it thinking, God, how much I would love to have, you know, Penelope Cruz just pissed off at me for 10 years, like amazing, you know. but it is also, you know, you kind of, when she shows up, you know what her character is going to be doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, but she brings up all these things because, you know, so you're saying it's one note, and I don't think it is. I mean, you're always clear on what she's feeling because she's such a great actress. But actually, it's a very complex portrayal of, you know, somebody who loved her husband very much, who still finds him very sexually attractive, who fundamentally trusts him about, you know, kind of all areas of life, and they don't lie to each other, which is interesting, right?
Well, apart from the big live omission that he has.
Yes, but when he's confronted, he instantly admits it. She saves him, right? And she doesn't make it a condition; she makes it a wish, right? Which all of the So the sense of a past love, you know, that speech that she has of recognizing the best qualities he had in the son, you know, who died, like, yeah, the conflict with the mother-in-law, you know, but also, you know, this thing of like kind of behaving, I was going to say properly, though, of course, you know, she's firing guns at him, but, you know, kind of socially doing the right thing. Yeah, she stands by her husband, kind of, you know, she gives him the money. Yeah, she cashes the check, but on his behalf, right? Kind of, you know, there's a...
Well, those things become complex, but they become complex later on in the film. And earlier on, before you understand this background, this history, and her feelings in any depth, I think that anger that she has does come across as one.
Sure,
it's something that the film
later.
No,
I'm not denying it.
Yeah.
But you know, kind of, because I just heard you say the word one note.
Yeah. And
it kind of it certainly starts on that note, but it becomes something.
Yeah, absolutely. By the end, I'm not thinking that at all. It's much richer, but
but
I think it's partly what we know about the character is richer, and partly her performance becomes richer as well.
Yeah.
I don't think it's offering those degrees, you know, those details earlier on.
No.
Later on, they're warranted and they're there.
No, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is that she as an actress brings a lot, because you really get her sense of guilt around the son, you know, her anger at the husband, you know, that is completely unreasonable, you know, because basically she just expected him to save him, right? But then, you know, that is quite a kind of love that, you know, is expressed where you think that somebody is so fantastic that, you know, they can go beyond reason. So I think, anyway, she brings out to me, yeah, because she makes it so vivid, some of the failures of the film in kind of emotionally engaging. Yeah.
I want to just mention actually that how much I liked Adam Driver as well. You know, I think we've given him slightly short shrift. Maybe I'm doing the same thing with Penelope Cruz. I'm like, well, yeah, he's blank in those scenes, but
No, I liked him very much.
this is the one I've seen Adam Driver be good a lot of times. He's really good, but this is the first film I think where I felt his performance is transformative. And maybe I'm being seduced partly by the fact that he's in prosthetics and a wig and he's playing 20 years older than he actually is. But it's extremely convincing. I feel like I'm watching a different person in this film, you know?
Well, actually, it's funny that you mention it because I was thinking, my God, it's only yesterday, that he was like, the sexy kind of young bohemian in Girls, right? Like, kind of, which I literally, I mean, it must be a decade ago or something, but it feels like you just saw it yesterday, and all of a sudden he's playing like a middle-aged man, right?
Yeah.
And being very good with it.
Like I said, 20 years old. I mean, how often do you really see that these days? The most you see of it is maybe in like Marvel movies, you get, digital aging and de-aging, but to do it, to get someone to just play twice, half again as old as they are, he's 40 and Ferrari's getting on for 60 in this film, I don't think you see it all that much, and it's really it comes across, it works so well, it really, really sells, and I love the kind of the attitude with which he carries himself, and I think it does speak to that authority that you were talking about, but like he's at a moment's notice, he could be pissed off with someone or he could be extremely pleased with them, and you never quite know which way he's going to fall, and he has the authority to fall either way,
Yeah.
I really, really love that, but I liked watching this character,
Yes. He's got tremendous authority, really, in his bearing that then makes his sayings convincing. So, his treatment of, what's the Spanish race car driver?
The
Portago, right, where he makes him wait, or he runs off with a car, and you think that's an extremely like self-confident person who can do that. Yeah, particularly, he's not doing it to a nobody. He's doing it to like a famous and rich kind of.
As we were just discovering on Wikipedia.
Well, but also he's going out with the Christian.
Yeah.
Right.
His godfather, it turns out, was which king is it? The 13th.
King Alfonso. Adam Driver.
That's why that highness line makes sense. I didn't realize that when he's out in the rain and he says Your Highness, and De Portago says which Highness, and he says not you, go and wait in the car. So, I didn't realize that's why he's saying Your Highness to him.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize
referring to him as well. Because then he is actually talking to some royalty, I think.
King Hussein or somebody like that.
That's it. He's buying a car off him.
So I just think his bearing, and again his height and his demeanor, kind of very well conveys the confidence of someone who can then act in those particular ways. So I think he's very good and he's very glamorous, and I think he's very sexy, really. So but I do think that there is a kind of a blankness to him as well.
I like the way the racing's shot as well. I mean, we've mentioned the racing a little bit, and it's definitely true to say that for a film that is about a racing company, Ferrari was a racing company before it was a car manufacturer, and the car manufacturing came about to support the racing and so on. And it's a film full of people saying we're racers. They're racers. They won't slow down and stuff. And Ferrari's all about I'm a racer, and even though he hasn't raced in a long time and he didn't win very much, despite all that, it's a film that does not have its focus on the racing. But when it's there, I mean, it feels kind of appropriate, right? It's not putting a huge amount of stock in it, but when it's there, I find it interesting and engaging, and I like the variety of shots that are used and the shakiness of the camera.
I like that too.
The close-upness.
Yes, I like that, and I like the way then also you get the overhead shots where you see the paths that the cars have to go through and so on.
Yeah,
that does add a sense of excitement and danger and so on. I think
particularly when they're going down the mountain path, and it's a lot of 180s, and the film has set up this thing about breaking into a corner and don't let him outbrake you because he'll win the corner and so on and so forth. And you've been told that in dialogue, but then when you see that path laid out ahead of them, you innately, I think, understand that this is where this comes into play. This question of braking and who's going to win the corner, and ultimately one of them, the Maserati, goes off the track at that point, and it's like Ferrari has won that battle.
I also I like the casting, right? So now, to speak in a different way than performance, I liked, for example, the contrast between Shailene Woodley
Mm.
and Penelope Cruz. Penelope Cruz, extremely beautiful and older and, alive with fire and emotion and anger, right?
Mm.
And Shailene Woodley, who looks like, a common sense, intelligent, yeah, but kind of steady. Yeah, she's got a kind of steady, earthy presence. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
there's a visual difference as well. Like one's dark haired, one's light haired,
yeah.
one's thin, and one is not to be uncharitable, but a little less thin.
Yeah, yeah. I like the contrast between them very much. And I like the quality that Shailene Woodley brought to the character.
Mm.
Yeah, you can understand why they represent different things in Ferrari's life.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and I do like the difference in modes that Adam Driver goes into when he's with the Shailene Woodley character and with the family. He's behaving differently. He's different around them, and he's soft. I mean, the way he behaves with his son when he's talking about the engine,
yeah.
and he's proud of him for
Yes.
for learning something or knowing something. That's it's extremely likable, and it's not something you'll see at any other point. What I suppose the closest that you'll get is when he's visiting his son's grave.
I know. But there's a fundamental, I think, lack of understanding or, in the film as written. Because to me, the last scene in the film should have been tragic or ironic or despairing, right? Like, it ends on what seems like a high note, let me introduce you to your brother,
Mm-hmm.
right? But actually, he's not recognizing his son. He's dooming his son to be an illegitimate son in a society in which legitimacy was very important, for the next 30 years. So there's something tragic about, or there should be something tragic about the father denying a son as he's introducing them to one that's lost. That should have been that should have given the audience a pang or a sense of sadness, or actually it's one of the ways in which he is both defeated, yeah, and then tries to do something good out of it, yeah. But you get none of that in that scene. It seems like entirely, I wouldn't say triumphalist, but it's meant to be a happy ending. Yeah, let me choose one son to the other.
Yeah,
but
he gets to treat his son as a family member as far as he possibly can.
That's
without
right.
giving him his name.
Yeah, but he doesn't. That's the thing, right? Like, so his son is not his son in the eyes of the world. He's denying his son. Yeah. So I don't know if the filmmakers understood that properly, or they just didn't convey it properly.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I'm not sure I thoroughly buy into the objection, but I get it.
Anyway, I suppose, my overall view of the film is that it looks smashing. I enjoyed it very much. I thought Adam Driver was glamorous, really, and Penelope Cruz is superb, right? But it's also a film that leaves me with like a lot of niggles, really.
Yeah, I've got one niggle of my own, which is a much more niggly niggle than any of yours. Which is, and the thing about the check and this $500,000 check, and if she cashes it, it'll be the end of him because he doesn't have the money yet before any deal is made with Agnelli. And I was thinking, if you try and cash it, why don't you just bounce? It'll be fine. But as it turns out, she cashes it, and then it's like insolvency people are coming in. I'm like, why is that? If I try and cash a check, there's no money in the account.
But
it gets bounces.
No, but there is money. I think the thing is how it would affect a sale. But then you also realize that a sale is just a negotiating ploy, and a sale will sell for a lot more once his name is cleared, right? So to me, there's a logic in all of that. That kind of, I didn't have any plot.
I mean, it may well be based on truth, and I just don't understand the finance world enough. But like, it just occurred to me as like, if the money's not there, then nothing happens. It's fine.
Yeah, no,
I did like the bank clerk that they keep going to, who he's dealing with Ferrari. I mean, it surprised me that he wasn't the bank manager. You'd think Ferrari are dealing with the manager, whereas this guy seems to be just like a high level clerk who deals with kind of big customers, I guess. But I did think like every time Penelope Cruz goes there, there's some kind of familial thing going on, and it's about the details, and then that's where she learns about the second family. And I was just thinking to myself, like, this poor bank guy just like has no interest in any of this. Like, no, like he's not the fucking counselor for these people. Like, just fucking take your money and leave.
No,
I like
it
that.
doesn't work that way. I mean, he probably was like a counselor to the family for sure. The
We
bank
didn't act
would have
like
been.
it.
Well, yes, he did, because you get a feeling that he's very used to dealing with her, right?
That's not the same thing, though. People bringing in their drama and you just going, "I'm just trying to do my job." It's not the same
but
thing.
he's clearly under instructions from Ferrari because he recognizes his slip.
But I find it quite funny though. It's like, these fucking people. Why can't my job be normal?
Huh.
Anyway,
Anyway,
I really liked it, and I do kind of. I suppose I hope in some sense that 2 years from now you'll have a look at it again and go, just strip away all the details that you're objecting to, and see the simplicity of the big characters and the story and what it's telling. I think you might enjoy it a lot more with the kind of bit of hindsight.
I mean, to be fair, I did enjoy it,
Yeah.
and I was very happy to see it on a big screen, which is where I think it deserves to be seen.
Yeah. Well, like me with Ford v Ferrari, I did enjoy it the first time. I was just kind of clouded with issues that I was having, and the second time I'm like, what the fuck were those issues? This is great.
All right, well,
so I really recommend it. I had a terrific time in this, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Okay, great. So on that note, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.